Shalom, shalom, everybody. And as Julie said, continue to put in the chat where you're from. And I'm hoping that parts of this will be interactive. I know it's hard on Zoom sometimes to have like a lot of in-depth conversation, but we can do whatever, we'll do our best. I wanted to share with you I guess you'd call it like a sketch, or I'm calling it Rebekah's legacy. I think it's Rebekah's legacy, and we're going to see it's also Abraham's legacy, how she is the one who acquires Abraham's strength, as she's as, like, I guess you could say she's as much as one of the foremothers as like a forefather. Like she really embodies, she has a lot of the skills, and she has the characteristics of what we'd call the avot. She carries on the legacy, maybe in some ways even more than Abraham. We'll see. Okay, we're going to do a character analysis of Rebekah. So I'm just going to get this out of the way. I don't always teach, some people think, oh, women rabbis are going to be teaching about the matriarchs. I hardly ever do. I have to be honest. But I love Rebekah. She speaks to me. I feel like in many ways I relate to her. In many ways I don't, but in some ways I really do. And so when somebody once asked me, like, which of the biblical ancestors do you most relate to, I said, I immediately said Rebekah. And then the more I explored her through the text, really more through the text itself than through a midrash, I gain more of an appreciation for her. She is a complicated character. And that is what I wanted to put forth today, really looking at Rebekah, understanding who she is, and what is her legacy? What do we learn from her? Why does the text take up so much space with her words and her actions more than any of the other patriarchs or matriarchs? So, or rather, any of the other matriarchs, not patriarchs. So I wanted to give her the time and the space that is due to her, and that's what we'll be exploring. So let's get into that. And Julie, if you'll help me, if there are some comments in the chat as we go along, it's once I screen share, it will be hard for me to manage that as well. So this text is on Safaria, and the link is there, and you could grab it. Sometimes it's easier to, well, this is very long. I printed it out, and it's like pretty long. You'd have to be ready for that, but if you're printing it out, but you can certainly open it up on another screen if that's available to you, or whatever you'd like to do. Okay, so we learn about Rebekah in a previous parsha. We're going to be looking at we're going from the end of Lech Lecha here, and then all the way through Chaye Sarah, and then through Toldot, and that's where we see pieces of Rebekah. So Rivka, all right, and I'll be interchanging Rebekah and Rivka. Okay, that's her Hebrew name. Before we begin, please join me in a blessing of Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. I've got some young mensches here who are listening in, so they're enthusiastic learners, and maybe they'll want to answer some questions as well. All right, so we learn at the end of Lech Lecha that a star is born. Why? Because we have this genealogy here, and it makes sure that we know about the birth of Rebekah. Okay, so sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah too has borne sons to your brother Nahor, which is interesting because we're looking at a genealogy here that mentions two women. All right, usually we are conscious of the men, not so much the women, but here we have two. And then Uz, the firstborn, and Booz, so Uz and Booz, great names. Haven't met anybody with those names yet. And Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Chazo, Pildash, Dildah, Tuel, and Bituel, right? Here's the highlight, being the father of Rebekah. Yes. So we learn about her that Bituel is the father of Rebekah. And then it goes on. Okay, so that was already in Lech Lecha. So what are Abraham's required characteristics for an ideal wife? So we're going to be taking a look at this now. In the very next parsha, we see after Sarah's death that Eliezer is sent. So Eliezer is the servant of Abraham, and I'm sure you've spent some time looking at this already, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because this is from last week, that Abraham needs to ensure his legacy, right? By marrying Yitzchak to somebody from his hometown. So he sends Eliezer back to Aram Naharaim to find a wife. And so there are just very, very specific criteria for this wife. What are they? Abraham was now old, Zakein Bab Yamim, and God blessed Abraham with all things. That's one of my favorite verses in the Torah. And Abraham said to Eliezer, vow to me, and that the God of heaven and earth, that you will not take a wife from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac. So what is the characteristic? What's the main characteristic? You can unmute or put it in the chat. That might take too long. Yes, not a Canaanite. Thank you, Tanya. Not a Canaanite. That's all you need to know. Eliezer, now go take care of it. But now Eliezer, right, he has his own agenda. He adds to Abraham's agenda, and he has additional criteria for this wife that he will choose. The Hebrew is here. I'm working in the English just because it might be easier for everyone, but some of the Hebrew, obviously Hebrew is important. Well, I'll highlight a few words that I want you to definitely see. So the servant took 10 of his master's camels, they set out, etc. He made the camels kneel down, and then he has a prayer, right? What is the prayer? He says, "Oh God of my master Abraham," love that, right? He's not praying to his own God. He's praying to Abraham's God. "Grant me good fortune on this day and deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I stand at the spring," and right, we know this, "as the daughters of the townspeople come out and draw water. Now let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. That's the one. Let her be the one who you have decreed for your son, for your servant Isaac. Through her shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master." So what are the additional criterial points? What does Eliezer add to the necessary characteristics of this wife for Yitzchak? So
and
watering.
Danielle, I just want to mention that folks need to raise their hand or let me know they want to be unmuted. They can't just unmute. Sorry, everyone.
Okay. Oh, they can't just unmute. No wonder there's radio silence. Radio silence. I'm thinking, maybe, okay. So, all right, Janet, what are the additional points? Unmute.
Okay. That she would be like kind of more caring than the rest of the women. I mean, like she would care for the animals in addition to, and I think that's, as we get further in the story, that's what really got to the servant, that she showed that additional extra caring beyond which you would normally expect. And
right.
That was a special trait.
Yeah, right. That's the main thing. Thank you so much, Jen. She should be caring. She should be compassionate. She should be intuitive, right? And it turns out she's all those things. Couple of highlights that I want to show you in verse 14. V'hayan hana'ara. It's written chaser. There's no hey. So if you read it chaser, if you didn't have vowels, it would say v'haya na'ar. And I don't want to overstate this, but I just think it's interesting. Right? Why? What the scribe? We could ask Julie about this. Describes sometimes omit a letter by accident, or maybe they have a subtle ulterior motive. I have no idea. But here you could read in hana'ara that it's chaser, that there's something like what's a na'ara without the hey? It's a na'ar. Right? There's kind of maybe a masculine energy going on here, like a strength that maybe is uncharacteristic of other biblical women that we've seen. Again, it's just kind of like a little side point just hanging there. Why is it not written with a hey when it clearly could be? Na'ar is like it may be pointing to more of a masculine energy, a fierce kind of, strength. Perhaps, okay? And then moving on, uva eda, through her, okay? This girl, Eliezer's saying, will show me, she will let me know. Right? I'm not going out there and looking for someone. The prayer that Eliezer articulates is that this person should, through the divine will, should manifest this na'ara. She should manifest it through her. It will be her agency. It will be her willingness, her desire, her words, her actions that will make it entirely clear that she is the one. All right. And so I think that I had a Rashi or something on that. We'll see if it pops up. Oh yeah, no, here we go. Here we go. Uva eda lashon tchina hoda liva. Rashi says this is a petition. Let me know through her that she is the right one, and we'll see that this is an important piece. That Rebekah has agency. That Rebekah has will. That Rebekah has an ability to step up, step forward, speak her truth, right? And be fully present in the narrative. Uva eda, and through her, right? This is really unusual. So let's move on. So now here we have a prayer is answered. He's still offering this prayer. And she shows up, Rebekah, who was born Bethuel, the daughter of Bethuel, who comes from Abraham's family. So checkbox, Abraham's will, done. This woman is coming from Abraham's brother Nahor, done. But the first sign of her, she is holding a jar on her shoulder. She's holding a jar on her shoulder. And the maiden was very beautiful. She was a virgin. We need to know that. Betula, v'ish lo yada, vater da'anya, v'tamale kada, vata'al. So we learn many things about Rebekah from the first sight. Number one, we learn that she's from the appropriate family, checkbox of Abraham's desire. But checkbox number two, she's coming with this jar and she says, please let me, And the servant ran toward her. Right now he's going to test, is she kind? Is she generous? Does she check the boxes in Eliezer's side of the chart? Please, give me some water. That's all he asks. The Torah adds, she's beautiful. The Torah adds that she's a na'ara, again, with that's chatzer, it doesn't have the hay. Tovat mar'eh, she's beautiful to look at, right? And these other characteristics that she's a virgin. Okay. And next, so we've already asked this, what do we learn about Rebekah? So, those additional points. And how does she act? So she, do I have that here? I want to show you a picture actually. So close your eyes if scrolling gives you a headache, and then we'll come back up here. So she immediately doesn't just give water to Eliezer, but she also immediately offers to give water to the camels. So she's not only generous, as he had asked, but super generous, intuitive, insightful, very present, right? She sees more than, she does more than what she's asked to do. And when you look at this picture of her, which is, it's a Venetian 16th century painting, I couldn't either didn't say it or I didn't find it, who the artist is. What do you notice about Rebekah here? Just looking at her, her expression and the way she's standing. You can raise your hand. Okay, Simcha?
There's like everything else is kind of dark, but there's like a purity of light in her, but then also how she's leaning in and to like, there's a softness about her, but there's a strength about her as well, but she's leaning into the moment and it's almost like leaning into the tension, but it's really softly. Yeah, there's a lot of different rabbit holes, but just even the colors she's wearing, it's like a very, she's a little bit more masculine in her top too for in that time period of painting. And she's done differently. It's like she's given more delicacy, and the artist spent more time on Rebekah. It's like the David of the painting, right?
Ooh, I love that. Thank you. So we got a little art history and definitely a good reading of this. Okay, Ginger?
It's just like she's just ultra focused on just that one painting. Is that Eleazar that's begging for water?
I believe
'Cause she
so.
looks like she's ultra focused. She's ultra focused on just these two people. Like nothing else is in the picture but those two people. So
Yeah.
she's giving them her undue attention for some reason.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah. Ultra focus, leaning in. There's a bit of a masculinity to her, a strength, I think we could say really more clearly. I wouldn't, there's a strength, there's a girth to her, an intensity, a presence. She's more detailed in the way the artist depicted her. So I would say yes to all those things. Okay, so we're going to come back up. All right, sometimes it helps to have a visual. Rashi, by the way, says that she's like 3 years old. I can't deal with that midrash, so I'm just not even going there, right? It's like, forget that, right? Okay, so I learned from a teacher, this past week, you don't have to teach everything that's written, right? So there's a lot written, so maybe we can pick and choose. Doesn't even make sense, right? Because she's obviously portrayed as being strong, when we think about going to the well, right? And pulling up all that water and bringing over, holding a jug. Like there's a strength to that. That's not a 3-year-old's job. That's, that's somebody who's doing some, hitting the gym. Okay. So sorry again for the scrolling. Let's move ahead. Okay. So here we have, when she's asked if she wants to go, right? So she's brought back to Lavan, who is her brother, kind of takes a major lead in the story of welcoming Eliezer, hearing the story. Oh, you want to marry, you want to bring Rebekah back home, no problem. But we have to ask her. So they bring her out, and they say, let's call the girl and ask her for a reply. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will, she says in verse 58. Vayomru eleha hatelochi im ha'ish hazeh, you're going to go with this guy, literally. And vatomer elech, I will go. And so then they bless her. And this is significant as well in this narrative. Oh, sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. These are the words that we say at a wet at a bedekin to the bride, and may your descendants seize the gates of their into myriads. May your descendants seize the gates of their foes. And Rebekah and her maids arose, mounted the camels, and followed the man, Eliezer. And so the servant took Rebekah and went his way, and Isaac, and then it goes on. So let's look at some of the commentary and let's make a comparison to Abraham. So Vatomer Elech, she says, I will go. Me'atzmi, this is what Rashi says, Va'af im enchem rotzim, and even if you don't want me to go, I'm going. I love that about her. Fiercely independent, doesn't need anybody's approval. This is what she wants. She's asked and she's willing. Elech, she says. Okay. So what is she agreeing to? So I have a note here. This is from Tikva Freimer Kensky's book on biblical women. And when she says she will go, what is she agreeing to? So the family may be reluctant and may wish to delay matters, but the girl shows no such hesitation and answers simply, I will go, not knowing either Abraham or Isaac, whose names are not even mentioned, right? The guy, I'm going to just follow this guy. There's no mention of Isaac. Who is he? It doesn't even matter, it seems. She declares her willingness to go. At that moment, it becomes clear that Rivka is the counterpart of both Abraham and Sarah. Like Sarah, she's the instrument of the promise, the agent through whom Isaac will become the father of a nation. She's also seen as Abraham, like a second Abraham, who, like him, voluntarily chooses to leave Mesopotamia for Canaan. Her I will go, her Elech, answers the 4 times the issue of going has been raised in her story, in his story and her story, and echoes God's command to Abraham, go. The voyage from Mesopotamia to Israel was the one qualification that Abraham sought in a daughter-in-law, and her willingness to do so establishes her credentials. Okay, and again, I'll be quoting that book, God willing, again, hopefully we won't run out of time. So how do we see that she is compared to Abraham? This is really beautiful. Number one, we call it zrizut, her alacrity. Comparing to Abraham, so we're looking at these two scenes. Abraham's actions towards the angels, right? In Lech Lecha, when the angels come to the tent, and Abraham greets them with Hachnasat Orchim, welcoming in the guests. And we're comparing that to Rebekah's actions toward Eliezer in this passage that we just read. What do we see? Zrizut, alacrity. Just as Abraham ran to his guests, she runs to the flock to feed the camels, rather. He hurries to cook and to prepare food for his three orchim, his three guests, just as she hurried to lower and empty her jar to water the camels and to give Eliezer a drink. Hospitality, greater generosity than hospitality requires, and also she offers greater generosity than that hospitality requires. Going further, Abraham is the bearer of two promises. Number one, to have many children. And number two, that your seed will inherit your enemy's gates. So similar wording, if you compare the verses. And here she's also, you should have many children, they say to her, and may your offspring seize the gates of your foes. Similar language. And finally, a fourth point, lech. We know the bookends of the Abraham story, lech lecha. Go forth from the land to the land that I will show you. And then, of course, we see Lech Lecha again in the Akedah story. And with Rebekah, will you go? Will she go? Yes, I will go. Rebekah's statement, affirmation of wanting to take that journey. And finally, presses for Isaac to find a wife in Mesopotamia. And then Rebekah will press for Jacob to find a wife in Mesopotamia. Pretty cool, right? So maybe you've looked at that comparison before, but it's well worth mentioning that she is the inheritor of Abraham. It's clear. The text wants us to see that. Isaac has things happen to him and upon him for him. Rebekah is the agent of change. Rebekah is the key actor, the leading lady, or not just lady, the leading role leading character in the Isaac cycle. Okay, love at first sight. This was a piece that had always interested me before. I always kind of got the impression, maybe it was taught to me this way, when Eliezer brings Rebekah to Isaac and she sees him praying in the fields, she lifts her eyes. This is another one, by the way. She raises her eyes. She lifts her eyes and she sees Isaac. It's another point of comparison. Abraham lifts his eyes and he sees Mount Moriah. Right, so similar language again there. And then it says, she alighted from the camel, vatipol me'al hagamal. So I always thought that was like she fell, like she swooned, which to me seemed not really characteristic of that kind of what she would do. I always just thought it was kind of a funny idea. Has anyone else heard it that way? That like she kind of saw Isaac and she swooned and fell off her camel, like fainted from his beauty because he was so handsome. Well, the tradition takes it in a different direction. Batam vatipol me'al hagamal. What does that mean? Ibn Ezra says, of her own free will, like nefilat apayim, like when you fall. When another example is like falling on your face in prayer, like that she puts herself down. She alights from the camel, not that she fell, but that she on her own volition dismounted, which that's a completely different, image, I think, right? And she puts on her veil and she's taking control of her actions, right? So there's that. I want to move on here. So then we come to our Parsha here. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to be his wife. And Isaac pleads to God on her behalf because she's barren. there's a lot to say about that, about this one idea of Vayetar Yitzchak Ladonai. There's so much commentary on, why does he pray for her? What is he praying for? Especially when we see a few verses later, she prays for herself. So we're not going to get into that, but it's something that you might want to investigate on your own. Right? And Vayetar lo v'tahar, and then she becomes pregnant. V'tahar Rivka ishto. Vayitrot tzu habanim b'kirba. And these boys just got twins, and they're like running inside of her. They're kicking, they're moving, they're busy in there. And she says, "But Tomer imken lama ze anochi, lama ze." This is the first thing we hear her say since Elech. Now she's like having an existential crisis. If this is what pregnancy is, why do I want this? Lama ze anochi, it becomes this like really, it's like an existential crisis. And so she goes and lidrosha et Adonai. And so she goes to pray about it, find out what's going on. And she finds out that there are these they're twins that are inside of her. And she learns of the promise that God says, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 separate people shall issue from your body. One shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Lots of commentary on this, on the Rav Ya'avod Sa'ir, the older will serve the younger, or the greater, there's just so many comments on that one point. But all we need to know at this moment, I would say, because that's a whole class on its own, is that she's learning that there's a promise inherent in here. That 2 separate people shall issue from, and one shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So she's going to remember that. Right, that is meaningful to her. V'Rav Ya'avod Sa'ir. All right, and then what happens? 2 emerge. The first one is red. That's Esav, and the other holding onto the heel. That's Yaakov. And Isaac was 60. You need to know that. Okay. So one more piece that I want to show you, and then we'll pause for some questions. So Vayigdalu Hanarim. Let's see what Tikva Freimer-Kensky says. Rivka takes a prominent role in fulfilling her birth oracle, acting to guarantee that her younger son will achieve his destiny as the preeminent heir. The moment comes as it is time to transfer the family heritage from Isaac to the next generation. Right, so that's what's happening here in chapter 25, verses 27-28. Vayigdalu Hana'arim. The boys grew up. And Esav was Ish Yodeh Tzayid. He was a hunter. Ish Sadeh, a man of the fields. And Yaakov, Ish Tam, Yoshevo Halim. A little more, however you want to understand Tam, pure, simple, homebody. I don't know. All right. He's the tent dweller. Vaye'ehav Yitzchak et Esav. And Isaac loved Esav. Ki tzayid b'fiv. He feeds him. He takes care of him. Right? V'Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. There's no reason given. Commentary here, Chazkuni says, Vaye'ehov Yitzchak et Esav. What does that mean? That Yitzchak loved Esav. In connection with Esav, the Torah uses the past tense, Vaye'ehov. Right? There's a difference here. Vaye'ehov, and then Rivka ohevet. So 2 different terminology used in maybe a kind of love that even Chazkuni is pointing out. That V'Yehov shows that Yitzchak did not love Esav all the time, but only at times when he provided him with venison, okay? And when describing Rivka's feelings for Yaakov, the Torah uses the present tense ohevet, as her feelings for him are constant, right? It doesn't depend on something. And then there's this additional comment that a lot of the commentaries bring out. Furthermore, it's the nature of women to love those who look after their domestic animals. Okay. I only point that out because that one's like repeated a lot. But I was more interested in the Vaye'ehov. It's kind of like, is it conditional? Is it, versus the constant, right? Something to note. Let's take a look at this too. Rebekah's preference for Jacob. Why does she love Jacob? This is from the 5 books of Miriam, so like a women's commentary on the Torah. Our daughters ask, why does Rebekah favor Jacob? As it is written, what we just read, we're told that Isaac favored Jacob because of his taste for game, but we're not given a reason for Rebekah's bias toward Jacob. Is she motivated only by God's promise that the older shall serve the younger? Well, Rebekah says, a mother's love is usually not so pure. I was drawn to Jacob because of his personal qualities. He preferred tent life to hunting. He was clever. He was smooth-skinned and handsome. He attended me and heeded my advice. Esau, on the other hand, was a wild, hairy man, intemperate, and a slave to his appetites. And Miriam, the prophetess, explains, Rebekah clearly understands that it's someone like Jacob who will fulfill God's covenant. Isaac, on the other hand, hoped for a different outcome for his family, to become, through Esau, a nation like all other nations among whom they live. And that is why God reveals the future to Rebekah. It's this fascinating point. Right? If it were left up to Isaac, he would choose Esau to be, first of all, he was the firstborn, so that would make sense to him. But to change the narrative of the Jewish people. Maybe he doesn't want a son who, the inheritor of the covenant to be someone who would be like him, led to be slaughtered. Maybe he wants a different kind of narrative for the future of the Jewish people, one that's a little more warrior oriented, a little more Gashmut oriented, a little more in this world, a little less, maybe God oriented, like his father was. That opens up to so many questions there. Before we get into the next part of tricking Isaac and the birthright story, let's just pause for a moment if you have any questions. I can unshare the screen if anybody has any comments at this point. Okay, good. Should I just go on?
There was a question in the
Tanya. Okay.
And there's also a question in the chat. So Tanya, I'll unmute you and then we'll ask the chat question.
Rabbi Upbin, is this the first time in the Torah that a woman has gone directly to God for herself? Because after Yitzhak prayed for her infertility and she was pregnant, it said that she sought God. So is this the first time that a woman took the initiative just to talk to God directly for herself?
It appears that way. I mean, Sarah has a mini conversation with God, right, where she says, well, I didn't laugh. And God's like, yeah, you did. So, but that wasn't necessarily a prayer. It was more like, a kind of a conversation. But I believe so, unless somebody has another example. I believe this is the first time, Vayidrosh et Elohim, which is even different because it's not even El. It's something like with God as direct object. So it would appear to be yes. Julie?
So there was a question in the chat from Stuart. Is there a rivalry between vegetarian versus carnivore diets?
I don't know if you'd necessarily get that from this dyad because Jacob is tending the flock. So I think to tend the flock also means to help feed your family. Could be, right? If you're a vegetarian, vegetarians are always looking for more proof texts. And I do eat meat, but I prefer to be a vegetarian. So if you can read that into it, yeah. I'm not. there are greater experts on vegetarianism than I am, but maybe you could read that into it. Yeah, Joanne.
Oh, sorry. I unmuted Julie because I think you meant Julie before, and then I thought you were talking to me.
Yeah.
Well, there was Hagar prayed. Hagar talked to an angel twice. I don't know if she was praying, but the angel talked to her first. And then she said, I'm running away from my mistress. And the angel said, go back to your mistress. But then there was a second time where she and Ishmael were dying from thirst. And then she talked to the angel. But I don't know if she was, praying.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. Joanne?
I feel like the overarching plot here is how is a great nation established? And that, human rather than gender-oriented word for strength. And then the younger being in charge over the older, the twins. It's like the story is telling us that a great nation is not based on gender, and it's not based on birth order, which are the qualities of an individual, but it's actually based on the qualities of the individual. Are they compassionate? Are they empathetic? Are they generous? Hardworking? And so there's this beautiful combination of the individual and the nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love your point. I think that's really, really important here, right? It's not just about birth order. It's not just about gender. It's about the characteristics and the quality of that human and that interaction. Yeah, fair. All right, one more comment, and then I just have a few more texts I would hope to have time to share with you. So was it Jenny who I saw? Yeah.
Ginny.
Yeah, I think what I was really asking about had to do with why Yaakov liked Esau only when he provided him venison. It wasn't a matter of vegetarianism versus carnivores. To me, it had some different meaning upon that.
Okay. What do you want to add to that?
No, that's really all I wanted to say, because it was just something that caught my eye as we were reading through it. That's all.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay, Jay, is your name Jay? What if a quick comment? Go ahead.
Jay and Esther, I understand also is
Wow. Okay. All right. And Esther, go ahead.
So I was struck by how Rebekah immediately replied to the request that she go with Eliezer. And she says, I will go. Just like Abram immediately replied to God's request that he go on a journey. It's very similar. And I wondered, did somehow Rebekah intuit that this was part of God's request that she go? And that's why she went, because she realized this was part of God's plan that Isaac should be next patriarch. And she wanted to facilitate that plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we read the book through the divine lens, we would see that. Reading it through the human lens, you might also see that, Laban isn't the best, influence, and she probably wanted to get out of that house as soon as she could. We probably know other people like that who are just given the first opportunity to leave, they take it. So there's a little bit of that we could read into it as well. Okay, and Esther.
Yeah, I had two comments. The first one was when you talked about the difference between Yaakov and Esav. To me, history has changed, because for a long time as Jews, we were not involved in anything exterior in sports or things like that. I'm thinking of the guy from the Chicago Bears, Lachman, who had in Brooklyn, his parents were immigrants. And when he was running defensive of the ball, his father yelled, "Let them have the ball." And in Israel today, we are men and women going to the army, and the whole attitude has changed. Our perspective of our role as Jews has changed. Yeah. And as far as Rebekah, even though as a mother, it's hard for me to accept that she favored one child than the other. But on the other hand, she got, according to Drash, she got her message while she was still pregnant. Yeah. So she followed that message.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Esther. She's fulfilling, what happens next in the narrative is that she does everything that she can within her ability to fulfill the promise. That she's not going to sit back and allow Isaac to subvert what God's blessing and God's plan was. And so she takes that into her own hands, that prophecy, that she's a prophet, right? It came to her. This was something that she had held on to and was waiting for the right moment, and seeing that this was the moment that Isaac was going to give Esau the birthright. She knew that was going to happen, or the blessing rather. She needed to subvert that and do something
And when you
like
say
beyond measure, like something not expected. And that's what we'll see next. Yeah,
when
Esther?
she said, and when she said Anochi, I have a few doctors in the family, including two of my kids, and they say that research shows that people who are pregnant with twins have a much more difficult time. And so when she complains Anochi, it's because she carried the twins.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because she carried the twins, right? Another commentary says, like she, like many of us, become pregnant. Like you see women who are pregnant and it's so wonderful for them. And then you get pregnant and it's like, what? this is what's happening to my body. What's happening to me, right? Not everybody has the most glorious pregnancy, right? So
But the research really shows that twins is a more difficult pregnancy.
More difficult. I'm sure it is. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Esther. So yeah, I want to also point out that I think that, when I read the text, and this is a valid reading. I mean, you can look at Esav and really just wonder, like, what is the problem? Like, why do the rabbis have such a problem with him, right? They need to set him up to be Edom. They set him up to be Rome, right? But when you're just reading the text, he doesn't seem to be that bad. Yeah, I mean, he says, I'm going to kill my brother. Well, his brother, some might say he deserves somebody to scare him a little bit after all that he's done. But Esav, there's a lot of pathos. There's a lot of empathy that people feel for Esav in what happens to him and how he reacts and his crying and clearly his love and his love for his father. And it is said of Esav that he has one, primary mitzvah that he does, even if he doesn't do any of the other ones, that he has like a very strong sense of kibud avaim. Very strong sense of kibud avaim, of honoring his parents. Okay. So are you gonna like cut us off, or do we have another maybe 3 minutes or?
Absolutely.
I mean, I understand it's time.
No, I mean, absolutely. I'm not going to cut you off if you want to keep going.
Okay. Well, with everyone's permission, I guess, I mean, it's not really right to do, but if I'll just take a couple more minutes just to get us through, maybe 5 more minutes. Okay. If you need to go, obviously, you won't fail the class, I just want to show you a couple of other things. Okay. I'm resharing. All right. So, okay. So we have the stealing of the trick, right? Basically, Rebekah has to do something extraordinary in order to deliver the promise, to deliver on the blessing for Isaac. Who are we talking about? For Jacob. Okay, so we have one point here that is a highlight, that Esav takes these wives from the Hittite wives, and they become a source of their antagonistic, a negative point for his parents, and we'll see that in a moment. All right, so here we have the episode of kind of the trickery. Rebekah's listening as Yitzchak sends Esav to get him something from the field, and now he's going to give him the blessing. And here Rebekah says really interesting words. Now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Tishma, let me find it here. Shma bekoli, listen to my voice. And the rabbis pick up on that. What I'm about, asher ani mitzava otach, that I'm commanding you. Who's speaking here? It's almost as if she's channeling the divine words. Listen, v'ata b'ni, shema b'koli. Right? These are words that are taken and put into God's mouth, okay, in other places in the Torah, or in the Psalms even. La'asher ani mitzava otach. Listen to what I'm commanding you, all right? And don't worry, if you think it's going to go awry and something's going to go wrong, the curse is going to fall on me. And she has so much confidence that it's going to work out, right? That she can say this, like, don't worry. Shema b'koli, listen to my voice. Okay, so what about that? Emek hadavar, listen to my voice. This is a commentator. As I instruct you, the word to my voice is redundant. So why does it say it twice? What would have been lost had the scripture just said it once? Listen as I instruct you. We have already explained that every time we see my voice, Shema b'koli, it's used, careful attention and understanding is implied. She told told him, listen carefully, as she was commanding to hint to him that she's speaking with divine authority, okay? This isn't just about her and him. This is about God's will. And I will take the curse upon me, she says. All right, don't worry about that. She says, I'll take the curse upon myself, but we already said, like, she doesn't believe what she's doing is wrong. But this is very interesting. This is from Tikva Freimer-Kensky. The story never tells us that Rivka must use deception because she is powerless. And later readers have often accused her of improper and immoral behavior. I mean, just a general reading of the text, like, Rebekah, what are you doing? You're setting your son up to be in mortal danger. This is trickery. You're tricking your husband. Like, she's doing so many things would seem like wrong or problematic, at least. But the biblical world valued cunning in the underdog. Only the powerful value honesty at all costs. The powerless know that trickery may save their lives. So yeah, Rebekah is powerful in the sense that, she carries on the legacy, but she's still a woman in that society. She's still a wife. She's still an underdog, on many counts in that society, that she has to take, I'm looking for the right word, like incredible measures, outstanding measures, right? Because she's the underdog to make this happen. All right. So now she needs to figure out, she knows that Esav is going to, try to get revenge on Yaakov. So what does she do now? So she pins the issue not on what happened there. Like, she can't tell Isaac what just happened, like how it came to be, although he figured out he gave the blessing to the wrong child. But again, she says, Ve'atavani shema b'koli, kum barach, again, with the divine articulation, get up and go to the house of Lavan, okay? And you're going to find yourself shelter there and move on and build your family. But what does she tag that direction on in talking to her husband? Remember, Vayhi Esav, when Esav was 40, he took those Hittite women. Well, they were a source of bitterness to Isaac and Rebekah. So then that's what Rebekah uses, right? Again, an underdog position, maybe a bit of a deception, but also not, because this is a real issue. Esav, those wives, we can't have that happening to Isaac. We got to send him away, so he has, a better chance of building the kind of family we want for him. And that's what she hinges the whole kind of, not an exile from the house, but, to save his life, sending him away. Okay. And that is really the last we hear of Rebekah, all right, in sending her son away and explaining that to her husbands. Again, she has a existential crisis here. Katzti b'chayai. I just love how she speaks. Katzti b'chayai. My life is miserable. I'm disgusted. Katzti is like cut short. There's a violence to it because of what Esav has done, right? We're not going to, I can't live with this, right? Katzti b'chayai. Again, it's kind of an existential idea. I'm disgusted with my life, all right, because of those Hittite women. All right. And then here's the last piece that I want to share with you, Rebekah's death. So this occurs later on in the Torah, Vatamat Devorah Mineket Rivka, that Devorah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel. We never learn that Rebekah dies. But this, according to the Midrash, is how we know that Rebekah died. Devorah was her handmaid. She died. The Torah Rebekah is so beloved in the Torah, we can't even learn of her death. We learn that she's buried, but we don't learn that she died, right? It's really interesting. So why is Rebekah's, this is from an article I just read. So actually, it quotes here in Targum Yonatan, says, which is like the, where do I have that? Here it is. The Aramaic translation of the Torah. It says there, and Devorah, the nurse of Rivka, died and was buried below Bethel in the field of the plain. And there it was told Jacob concerning the death of Rivka, his mother. And he called the name of it, the other weeping, the other weeping. So there's a way of reading alon b'chut, not as alon b'chut, the tree of weeping, but like another weeping. And they turn that from the Greek, a Greek phrase. And they learn from that Rebekah dies. So I think I want to end there. I had one more little image to show you. This is in the Jewish Museum from Tissot, or I'm probably saying it wrong, Tissot. I don't know. My art historian in our crowd will have to correct me. And here, you know, she's again looking on, leaning in, right? That seems to be her posture, overseeing this. I love her tank top here and her veil, kind of the mashgiach of this situation, you know, the spiritual overseer of making sure that the blessing is conferred on the right person. So this kind of is the conclusion here. So my blessing for us is that we learn from the matriarchs just as much as the patriarchs, that we read into Rebekah's story, even though it is problematic at times, to recognize her strength, to recognize her courage, to recognize her spiritual connection to God and to the blessing and to the perpetuity of the Jewish people, and to at times see ourselves into Rebekah and to take on that strength and that divine connection. So may it be for us and our families, and let us say amen.